After years of speculation, what Tony Iommi just said has confirmed what we suspected about his bond with Ozzy Osbourne. This isn't just about friendship. It's about something far more tragic. Join us as we uncover the full story of how it all went down. One last time. Tony Iommi had grown up alongside Ozzy Osbourne. They had no idea back then that their paths would one day lead them into the center of a musical storm. Together, they helped shape what the world now calls heavy metal. Through every twist and turn, they stuck by each other, holding on through changes, setbacks, and victories. That bond stretched across 57 long years. It was more than just a friendship. It became a part of who they were. The final days brought a different kind of weight. Just a few weeks before everything changed, Ozzy had stepped back onto the stage with Black Sabbath. That farewell performance took place at Villa Park, right in the heart of Birmingham. It meant a lot to every member of the band. It had meant even more to Ozzy, who had been struggling with pressure and health issues, but still found the strength to turn up. He had walked into rehearsals determined, even if the effort drained him. The band had been careful not to push him too hard. They knew he was carrying more than he let on. But Ozzy had wanted that performance. He had set his heart on it. He wanted to be part of that last moment with them. Tony remembered those rehearsals clearly. They had kept things simple. Ozzy had come down, joined in, smiled a few times, and shared a laugh. Even if he wasn't feeling his best, he still gave what he had. That moment gave him a reason to get up and move forward again, but none of them knew it would be the last time. Then came the day when it all stopped. The news arrived suddenly, without warning. Tony had not been ready for it. The world around him seemed to stop moving. He couldn't think straight. He couldn't sit still or find a way to move past the shock. Each day since has felt strange and hard to handle. He still reached for his phone out of habit. He still thought about sending Ozzy a message. But every time he picked it up, he had to face the truth again. Geezer Butler had called soon after. He was just as shaken. He couldn't bring himself to carry on as usual either. They had both been hit hard. The loss was more than either of them could put into words. Everything they had built together, everything they had shared, now felt like it had been pulled out from under them. The space Ozzy left behind couldn't be filled. The phone calls between Tony and Ozzy over the years had always carried the same rhythm. They would start off talking about their aches and pains, about how their bodies were giving them trouble. It had become part of their routine. They would complain a bit, laugh a bit, then talk about music, life, and memories. That rhythm had kept them grounded. Looking back, Tony felt grateful that they had managed to share that final performance. It hadn't just brought them together one last time. It had given them something real to hold on to. The show had meant everything to Ozzy. It helped him feel part of the band again. It helped him push through. Now, with Ozzy gone, Tony had been left holding on to those memories. He played them over and over in his head. Every rehearsal, every phone call, every laugh, they all came back to him. The house felt heavier. The days dragged on. But those memories, even though they hurt, were all he had left to hold on to. The end of an era. Ozzy Osbourne had made up his mind to go ahead with one final performance, no matter what it cost him. Even though his health had gone downhill, he pushed through and focused on putting on that last show. The event was named Back to the Beginning, and it was held in the same place where his journey with Black Sabbath had first started. He wanted to give something back to his hometown, the place where everything had taken shape. That night, Ozzy took his place on stage, sitting on a throne, surrounded by his longtime bandmates. He didn't have the strength to stand for long, but he stayed sharp and kept up with the music. Everyone in the crowd knew they were watching something special. It wasn't just another show, it felt like a full-circle moment. All the old songs were brought out again, from War Pigs to Iron Man, and Ozzy even did a separate solo set. People cheered, clapped, and sang along. There was energy in the air, and Ozzy gave what little strength he had left. Before that night, he had trained hard just to make it happen. He pushed through pain and exhaustion. Every rehearsal was a challenge, and his body could barely keep up. His friends noticed that he didn't look well. They could see the struggle in his eyes. But Ozzy didn't let go. He kept showing up, even if only for a short time. They didn't bring him in every day, just enough to run through a few songs. After singing, he'd sit back and chat with the others. They talked about old days, shared a few laughs, and then he would head out to rest. The day after the show, he sent a message saying he was worn out and didn't have any energy left. It was clear that the performance had drained him. Still, he didn't complain. He had done what he came to do. He had said goodbye the way he wanted. His friends felt he had held on just for that night. Once it was done, everything changed. After the final performance, he was brought backstage in a wheelchair. He had asked to say a last few words to his friends before leaving. He smiled a little and talked for a bit. His face showed relief, as if he had finally finished something he had been holding on to for too long. He knew the show had gone well, and that gave him peace. Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler, both original members of Black Sabbath, had stayed close to him through this final stretch. They understood what this meant to him. It wasn't just about music. It was about ending something properly. During the rehearsals, they watched him hold himself together. He sat and sang, even when it looked like he barely had the strength. He had grown weaker, but he pushed through, determined not to let anyone down. The news of his passing came only weeks after the show. Iommi couldn't believe it at first. Just a day earlier, they had exchanged messages. It didn't feel real. He kept thinking back on that performance, on Ozzy's decision to go through with it, and on how it had all ended. That final night had become the last memory they all shared together. The performance wasn't just another concert. It became the final chapter of the band. There wouldn't be another comeback. There wouldn't be more music from them as a group. That night had closed the door. It had been Ozzy's way of letting go. And for everyone who had followed them from the start, it felt like the end of something that had started long ago and had finally come to a stop, right where it had all begun. Honoring a rock legend. After the demise of Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi looked back on the years they spent together. He remembered all they had built as bandmates and friends. Geezer Butler and Bill Ward also came forward and shared their own feelings. Ward remembered the moments that slipped away, the calls they didn't make, and the hugs they never got to share. All of it now stayed locked in memory. He sent his sympathy to Sharon Osbourne and her family. He also reached out to fans around the world who had followed Ozzy's journey for decades. Many people from across the entertainment world showed their love and respect after hearing the news. Artists like Elton John and Youngblood spoke out. Even actors like Jason Momoa and musicians like Gene Simmons made sure to take a moment to honor Ozzy's name. Their words spread across social media as everyone joined together to remember the man who had shaped rock music in such a strong way. In Birmingham, crowds started to gather. They didn't want to sit at home. They wanted to go out and stand where his story began. They headed straight to the Black Sabbath Bridge. Others stood near the mural recently painted on Navigation Street, while many went into the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, where a book of condolence had been placed. That book began to fill up fast as fans passed through, one after the other, leaving notes filled with love and loss. The city began to ask how best to honor him. Some brought up the idea of a statue. Others felt there should be a yearly event to remember his influence. People didn't want to let his memory fade away. They wanted something that would always stay, something that would mark his place in history, not just in music, but in the heart of Birmingham. Tony Iommi spoke about the idea of a statue. He believed Ozzy deserved one, but he also thought the full band should be honored, since they all stood side by side through the rise of Black Sabbath. He explained how they had worked as a team, pushing forward together for years. He felt that someday each of them would be remembered in the same way. He thought Ozzy would have felt touched by the way people came out, how they filled the streets, and how they shared their love so openly. Ozzy left behind his wife Sharon, who had stood by his side for decades. Their children, Amy, Kelly, and Jack, were now adults, but the bond with their father had stayed strong. From his earlier marriage with Thelma Riley, he also had children, Jessica and Louis, and helped raise her son, Elliot. His family stretched across 2 generations, but each member carried their own deep connection to him. The world had lost a man who gave everything to his craft. Fans played his music loud and walked around the city just to feel close to him. They took photos by the bridge and left candles beneath his mural. Even though he was no longer there in person, his energy still filled the streets. His influence reached far beyond stage lights and concert halls. It shaped lives, moved people to create, and gave strength to those who felt lost. His passing didn't push people apart. It brought them together. And in that shared sorrow, they found comfort in remembering the man who had made such a huge difference. Now, his memory will stay alive in every street of Birmingham, in every riff played on a guitar, and in every fan who grew up with his voice in their ears. Nothing had been forgotten. Everything he had given was still there, and it would never fade. But how did it all start? The birth of Black Sabbath. Back in the early days, the sound that Black Sabbath built didn't just happen by chance. It came together slowly, piece by piece, shaped by different paths and experiences. In the beginning, their music was filled with heavy grooves and dark lyrics, and this grabbed the attention of listeners across the world. Their style didn't stay in one place. It kept spreading, pulling other bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden into its shadow. That thick, heavy sound would soon grow into something larger. It became the root of heavy metal. But before that, the band had to find each other and hold things together. Tony Iommi had already begun to shape his guitar skills long before Sabbath took form. He spent a lot of time in small clubs around Birmingham, joining blues groups and figuring out how to stand out. Those early years helped him stay grounded, but he knew something was missing. Playing small gigs helped him get by, but he didn't feel like he was building anything lasting. That started to change when he teamed up with 2 other musicians, Geezer Butler and Bill Ward. Something started to grow between them, something different from what Iommi had felt before. Iommi had a short break away from that new spark when he joined the band Jethro Tull for a bit. It didn't last long. The experience gave him a better look at the professional side of music, but it didn't feel right for him. When he returned, he could tell that this group he'd started with, back when they were still called Earth, had real promise. The pieces were coming together, but they still needed a singer. That search led back to someone from Iommi's past. Ozzy Osbourne had been interested in music for a long time. When he was younger, he looked up to bands like the Beatles. Their songs lit a spark in him, but as he got older, his taste began to shift. The music he loved started to carry more weight. Bands like Led Zeppelin and Cream began to pull him in. Their raw sound made him feel something new. That's when the heavier side of music began to call him. He wanted to be part of that energy. Even though Iommi and Osbourne had crossed paths before, they had gone to the same school, it wasn't a smooth start when they tried to work together. Iommi didn't believe that Osbourne could really bring anything powerful to the band. At that time, he didn't think Osbourne had what it took. He didn't feel sure about it. But things took a surprising turn once they actually began to rehearse together. The sound that came out of those early sessions felt strange and rough, but it worked in a way that no one could explain. Iommi's guitar riffs were sharp and heavy, while Osbourne's voice carried a strange, haunting tone. Geezer Butler's bass lines held everything together, and Bill Ward's drumming gave their songs that deep, dragging beat. That mix built the early shape of Sabbath's sound. It wasn't pretty, but it hit hard. Their music didn't follow the rules. It carved its own path. They didn't fit into the usual categories. Their sound pulled away from blues and leaned into something darker and harder. That shift didn't just change their music, It changed rock music altogether. More and more fans started to pick up on what they were doing, and soon other bands were trying to do the same thing. Sabbath's early days weren't smooth, and their lineup wasn't perfect right away. But through hard work and strange luck, the band found their core. Even with doubts and early mistakes, their sound took hold, and they began to move forward, shaping the future of metal with each song they created. Meanwhile, let's take a look back at how the relationship between these two legends started and how far they came. Ozzy Osbourne and Tony Iommi had known each other since school, but their early connection was not built on friendship. Back in those days, things didn't go well between them. Tony had treated Ozzy badly, making fun of him and picking on him, so Ozzy tried to stay away from him whenever he could. Instead, he ended up spending more time with Geezer Butler, and that small decision slowly shaped what would become one of the most powerful bands in rock history. At first, there was tension between them, but everything changed once Ozzy started singing. Even if his words didn't always make perfect sense, there was something in his voice that pulled people in. He didn't just sing the lyrics. He gave everything he had, filling each note with raw energy. Songs like War Pigs started to sound like warnings of disaster, and the emotion he poured into each line brought those tracks to life in a way that couldn't be ignored. As time went on, Ozzy began to grow used to Tony's guitar playing. Even though they had started off with some distance between them, the music slowly brought them closer. Whenever Ozzy didn't have a melody in mind, he would sing the guitar parts instead, shaping the songs by matching the rhythm and force of the riffs. This method worked especially well on tracks like Iron Man and Hand of Doom, where every member of the band played with full force, pushing their instruments to the limit. Ozzy wasn't a trained musician, but that didn't stop him. What he lacked in technical skill, he replaced with performance. On stage, he became someone else entirely. Dressed in black and pacing across the stage like he had just been let loose, he looked wild and untamed. Audiences didn't just watch him, they felt pulled into his world. He brought the band's dark, heavy sound to life in a way that left a strong impression on anyone who saw it. When the 1980s came, Ozzy's journey with Black Sabbath came to a difficult end. Things had grown tense inside the band, and eventually they split. But even after going his own way, Ozzy didn't leave everything behind. Tony's guitar sound still influenced the music Ozzy made. In his solo shows, Ozzy kept the spirit of those old Sabbath songs alive. On his live album, Speak of the Devil, he performed new, powerful versions of the band's earlier tracks, keeping that energy going for a new crowd. Even though their friendship had its ups and downs, Ozzy and Tony had built something important together. They didn't always agree, and sometimes they even drifted apart. But no matter how far they pulled away from each other, their names stayed linked. Together, they had created something massive, something that helped shape heavy metal music into what it is today. There was a long stretch when they couldn't stand each other. The connection they once had broke down slowly, and they drifted apart. Their history as bandmates in Black Sabbath made things even harder. Old issues stayed between them, and both of them held on to anger for years. Things began to shift when Ozzy had to go through surgery. He couldn't move around much, and during that time, Tony reached out. He began to send messages regularly, checking in on him. That kind of care softened things between them. Slowly, they picked up the friendship again. They started texting each other more often and brought back the connection they once lost. What helped even more was their stunning performance together. They got up on stage during the closing ceremony of the 2022 Commonwealth Games and played Paranoid. But that was only the beginning. From foes to friends. Being back together brought back memories, and it showed that their bond was still there underneath the past issues. Ozzy admitted he used to feel nervous around Tony. The way Tony carried himself made it hard for Ozzy to speak up. Back in the Black Sabbath days, Ozzy often felt like an outsider. The rest of the band focused on the instruments, while Ozzy focused on singing. but he always felt like his voice didn't carry enough weight in decisions. He tried to add melodies to their songs, but many times he felt like he wasn't heard. Some of the songs pushed his voice too far, and he couldn't keep up. It made him feel separate from the others, like he didn't belong fully in the creative process. When he looked back at how things ended with the band, those feelings still stayed with him. Being fired from Black Sabbath didn't come as a surprise to him, because he had always felt pushed aside. The breakup didn't happen suddenly. It built up over time. Ozzy felt like the other members worked closely together while he stood on the edge, trying to keep up. Even when they reunited years later for several tours, those old feelings didn't go away. From 1997 until their final show in 2017, they got back on stage many times. But even then, the tension never fully left. Drummer Bill Ward wasn't part of those later shows or the final album, 13, and that absence also weighed down the mood. Something felt off. The spark from the early days wasn't there anymore. Ozzy remembered those tours clearly. To him, they didn't bring much joy. Every time they got together, it felt like stepping backward. Instead of enjoying the shows, he had to deal with old power struggles. Tony often reminded him that it wasn't just his band. That kind of talk made it hard to relax and perform freely. There were too many reminders of old fights and disagreements. The backstage moments were heavy and the atmosphere stayed tense. Even though they played music for big crowds, behind the scenes didn't feel good. The energy was different. It wasn't about sharing something anymore, it was about trying to get through each night without clashing. Ozzy didn't feel like he belonged in the same way he once had. The tours felt like a repeat of the same problems they never worked out. But despite all that, time eventually helped. When Tony began to reach out during Ozzy's recovery, things changed again. They started to talk like old friends without the past getting in the way. Playing at the Commonwealth Games didn't fix everything, but it brought back something real. Ozzy could finally look at Tony without feeling weighed down. The friendship had gone through a lot, but somehow it managed to come back around. The way their paths crossed and changed direction over the years showed just how deep the roots of their partnership went. What began as schoolmates with bad memories turned into something much greater. Their music held people's attention, their stage presence pulled fans into a different world, and their bond, though tested by time, stood strong in the sound they left behind. Through every fight, every reunion, and every song they worked on, the legacy of their work carried on, louder than any disagreement between them.